Deep political intentions and manipulations are behind U.S. charges against Chinese companies, including Huawei and its executive. So said a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson on Tuesday, adding the U.S. has been using its national power to crack down on Chinese companies. The U.S. Justice Department on Monday issued an extradition request for Huawei's CFO Meng Wanzhou based on indictments accusing her and her company of fraud and skirting U.S. sanctions on Iran. A Canadian judge in charge of her case has delayed it by a month until March the 6th. While her personal fate is hanging in the balance, the U.S. has branded Huawei, a leading 5G company, as a threat to its national security. The Trump administration contends that the world is engaged in a new arms race, and whichever country dominates 5G will gain an economic, intelligence and military edge for much of this century. Can the U.S. win this new arms race by targeting Chinese companies? As Chinese negotiators are in Washington for trade talks, how will China stay the course while its companies and citizens are not being treated objectively and fairly, to borrow words from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Joining me in the Beijing studio is Professor Wang Yiwei, the Jean Monnet Chair Professor at Renmin University, and from Washington, D.C., Steve Pruitt, Managing Partner at Watts Partners, and also a former staff director of the U.S. House Congressional Budget Committee. Before we start the discussion, let's take a listen of what the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Tuesday.
For some time, the U.S. has been using national power to tarnish the image of and crack down on specific Chinese companies in an attempt to strangle their lawful and legitimate operations. Behind such moves are deep political intentions and manipulations. We strongly urge the U.S. to stop its unreasonable bashing on Chinese companies, including Huawei, and treat them objectively and fairly. China will also continue to uphold the lawful and legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
Okay. Yeah, Professor Wang here. What does China mean by political intention and manipulations? What does China think the U.S. is really after?
Well, I think even not just political, even strategic, I think, because Huawei is a strategic 5G
strategic,
company.
You mean?
Strategic, yes.
Yeah.
Strategic means for the U.S. is more concerned about the cyber war because it's crucial technology. 5G is about the human society. It's not just about people's connections of the 4G. So it's not just about the speed. I think the U.S. Such a kind of behavior is enforce the alliance will be joined. They'll be linked with the Chinese company and join the U.S. bloc, and then we'll be have the Cold War will really be happening. That's very, very concerned about that.
Okay. What I noticed, besides Justice Department officials, the Monday presser of the JLC also saw senior officials from U.S. governmental bodies, including the Commerce Secretary, FBI Director, Homeland Security officials. So, Steve, what messages do you think such a collective, such a lineup want to send to the world and to other governments?
Well, I think, again, looking at America, you've got to understand that the current administration is widely publicized as always playing to their base. And that base demands, quite frankly, confrontation literally on any and every issue that arises in the American dialogue, be it domestic or global. As a result, much of what we're seeing now is part of that playing to the base exercise. And while it certainly is not what one would consider to be the traditional way of doing business in the world, I have held for some time now that you cannot judge this administration, should not judge this administration, by traditional political, diplomatic, or other metrics. You have to judge this administration based on what they do and what is actually provided for. And again, if you look at what is happening in the broader Chinese-U.S. dialogue, there are many more issues than 5G at play here. And this literally serves as a tool for another element that this administration likes to use, and that is to create chaos and diversion from other activities as they arise.
Yeah, Are you saying that...
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah. Well, are you saying that they're doing this... I didn't really understand exactly how many considerations they have in their mind, because normally if a company is found to have violated some kind of sanctions, they will be given a fine, but here they're treating this company as really the arch enemy of the United States, and they're chasing after its executive with multiple counts of indictment of charges, and each carrying decades as a prison term. Steve?
Well, again, if you look at the process that is evolving, yes, there is a highlighted key executive of Huawei in play here, but at the end of the day, what are the penalties? And what can be done in terms of promoting, if you will, a vision or another episode of the Trump reality show to his base. If the executive is brought to America, there's a trial and a discussion in the public venue, and then it ends up with fines, then so be it. This is just an escalation of the showmanship that we've seen, quite frankly.
Okay, Professor Wang, what is your take? What do you think such an impressive lineup, all of these governmental agencies standing on one front, accusing this company and this executive, what message do they want to send to the world?
Firstly, so-called the independence of the judicial system is not that kind of true. You see, the Americans' legal system, even Canadians' legal system, serves for the political and strategic purpose. That's, I think, we'll see very clearly. The timing, the truth, just the Vice Premier of the Liu He just arrived in Washington for the crucial negotiation. And, past 1 year, just started from the ZTE, now it's Huawei, it's all about 5G. So it's no other excuse that the U.S. is very worried about the alliance system, national security, strategic comparative advantages, all rely on the traditional dominance in the 4G. So that's what they rule. Do you
think the world is really engaged in a kind of new arms race, and the weapons are the 5G and all that enables, Professor Wang? Because some people think it's an overstatement, like one Canadian opinion piece says, 5G had better be worth it for all the global chaos it's wrecking.
Of course, it's connected with the military and the security, but also about the global supply chain, the value chain, because 5G is not just provided by Huawei, but Huawei is a pioneer company, but they also rely on the other U.S. company, and the U.S. company as well also rely on Huawei and others. So this block of the Huawei and the ZTE makes the globalization turning reverse, and makes the divided the two blocks, the Soviet Union and the United States in the past. So it's very worried about that. I think, though of course we understand the U.S. want to protect the interests of the is a competitor of the Huawei, but this doing so make all the other U.S. alliance de-linked to Huawei, and then makes them connect with the U.S. companies, and that's definitely against the globalization.
So you think it is economic warfare that the U.S. is trying to wage here? Steve, what is your take on the intention and also on the Washington's evaluation on 5G competitions? Is the U.S. strategy on 5G going to work?
Well, I think the strategy is, again, as Professor Wang pointed out, is more focused on economic competition here. It's 5G is just a tool or a platform for carrying out that competition, and it again doesn't necessarily become the key element. It's like buying a new car that goes faster and is shinier versus the question of where you're going in that vehicle. As far as the U.S. is concerned, though, I think you've got to focus on, again, what we're trying to get to. The U.S., from this administration's perspective, is really looking at numbers, and this is a mathematical exercise with the trade talks, and that's, again, whether the Chinese...
But on the other hand, I really have to interrupt you here because I don't have much time. We also have FBI Director, Mr. Christopher Wray, who has repeatedly talked about a whole society approach to react to China's threat to the United States. He even talked about the kind of naivete in the mind of the U.S. on the United States, thinking even Chinese students or Chinese scholars represent kind of threat, espionage risks to the United States. So is there some kind of ideological differences here we're talking about, or even xenophobia? Professor Wang.
Well, I don't want to suggest a level of naivete. Of course that's going on, but at the end of the day, this is about cybersecurity and the escalation of that as a major issue between countries in general.
Okay,
and
Professor
what we're
Wang.
seeing here in America is an increased attention to that as well.
Okay, Professor Wang.
I think the national security is maybe is also excuse. The key is about the core technology of the industrialization 4.0. 5G is the key.
So how is China going to react? At this moment, we know negotiators are in Washington. How are these negotiators going to stay the course to what they have to do, while the United States is not treating China's companies and citizens fairly and objectively? Professor Wang.
I think we have the more enforce more legal systems and to protect the American interests and other foreign interests in a fair way. But we ask the U.S. government also to do the same way.
Mr. Steve, do you think the U.S. is going to do that? Do you think the U.S. judicial system can really have a fair judgment of the case?
Yes, I do believe they will, and we've seen a number of instances where this administration has taken things to the judicial system and their perspective has not withstood judicial review. So let's wait and see what the case is. I think that's critical here. Also, I suspect that much of the attention that this administration wants to really give this is to these trade talks.
Okay.
Quite frankly, if these things don't resolve themselves, both the Chinese and the Americans are going to be in for some very rough economic sledding.
Okay, we are going to leave it there. Professor Wang Yiwei, the Jean Monnet Chair Professor at Renmin University of China, and from Washington, D.C., Steve Pruitt, Managing Partner at Watts & Partners and former Staff Director of the U.S. House Congressional Budget Committee. That's it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got the point.